Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the readings on her screen for the third time that morning. The numbers hadn't changed. The sun was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. "Run the calculations again," she told her computer. The machine hummed softly and displayed the same terrible result. 18 months. That's how long Earth had before the sun collapsed into itself. Sarah walked across the observatory floor to where her colleague, Dr. Marcus Webb, sat hunched over his own computer. His face was pale, and his hands shook slightly as he typed. Sarah asked. Marcus nodded without looking up. "The solar core is becoming unstable. But this isn't natural, Sarah." 3 weeks ago, deep space monitors had detected strange energy patterns coming from the sun. At first, scientists thought it was just normal solar activity. The sun always had spots and flares, but as the patterns grew stronger, the truth became clear. Something was wrong. Very wrong. "Look at this," Marcus said, pointing to his screen. "See these energy signatures? They don't match anything we know about." Sarah felt sick. 8 billion people lived on Earth. Millions more lived on Mars, the Moon, and space stations. Even if they started evacuating right now, they could only save a tiny fraction of humanity. "We need to tell the World Council," she said. "I already sent the report," Marcus replied. Around the world, other scientists were making the same terrible discovery. The sun was not just dying. Something had poisoned it long ago, and now that poison was finally killing it. 3 days later, President Elena Vasquez stood before the United Nations. Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed the weight of carrying the worst news in human history. "My fellow humans," she began, "our scientists have confirmed what we feared. The sun is dying. We have approximately 18 months before solar collapse." Panic spread across the world. People emptied stores of food and supplies. Some gathered in churches and temples to pray. Others spent their time with family, knowing these might be their last days together. The evacuation plans were heartbreaking. Only the youngest and healthiest people could be saved. Massive ships would carry them to other star systems, hoping to find new homes. But the ships could only hold a few million people. Sarah worked day and night, trying to find a solution. She studied every piece of data about the sun's condition. The more she learned, the more hopeless it seemed. Whatever had poisoned the sun was beyond human understanding. 2 weeks into the crisis, everything changed. Lieutenant Commander Rosa Martinez was working the night shift at the Deep Space Monitoring Station when her computers started beeping loudly. Something large was entering the solar system. "This is impossible," she whispered, staring at her screen. The object was huge, bigger than any ship humans had ever built. But it wasn't made of metal or rock. It seemed to be made of light itself. The crystalline ship moved slowly toward Earth. It was beautiful in a way that made people stop and stare. The crystal surfaces reflected starlight in colors that had no names. As it got closer, more details became visible. The ship wasn't just one piece. It was made of thousands of smaller crystals all connected together, like a floating city made of gems. Scientists around the world pointed their telescopes at the ship. Radio operators tried to make contact, but the ship remained silent as it took position near Earth's moon. For 3 days, nothing happened. The crystal ship just stayed there, motionless and silent. Some people were afraid. Others were curious. A few dared to hope that whoever was inside might be able to help. On the 4th day, the ship began to change. The crystals started glowing brighter. Energy patterns flowed across its surface like rivers of light. Then, slowly, something emerged from the ship. They looked like beings made of pure energy, contained within crystal shells. They had no faces as humans understood them, but somehow people could sense intelligence and purpose in their movements. The aliens moved through space without ships, protected by fields of energy that sparkled like diamonds. Dr. Chen watched from the observatory as 3 of the beings approached the sun. They moved with grace and determination, carrying what looked like massive crystal seeds. Marcus asked. Sarah could only shake her head. She had no answer. The three beings reached the sun and did something that would be remembered forever. They opened their crystal shells and released their inner light directly into the solar core. The energy they gave was not just power, it was life itself. Part of their very existence flowed into the dying star. The effect was immediate. The sun's dangerous energy patterns began to stabilize. The poison that had been killing it was being neutralized by the aliens' sacrifice. But Sarah could see that the three beings were growing dimmer. They were giving up part of themselves to save a world they had never seen before. One by one, the three crystal beings faded. Their light became part of the sun itself. They died to save 8 billion strangers. The remaining aliens gathered near their ship. After several hours, they sent a single message to Earth. It came not as radio waves or digital signals, but as thoughts that every human could understand. Life preserves life. The crystal ship began to move away from Earth. As it prepared to leave the solar system, it sent one more message. We are the Kethmori. We wander the stars seeking those who need help. Your son will live. Your people will survive. Then they were gone, leaving humanity alone with a stabilized sun and a debt that could never be repaid. 3 beings had died to save a species they had never met. Their names were not known. Their faces had never been seen. But their sacrifice would be remembered as long as humans existed. Dr. Sarah Chen looked up at the healthy sun and made a promise. Humanity would never forget the Kethmori. Somehow, someday, they would find a way to say thank you. 5 days after the Kethmori left, Maria Santos stood before the World Council with a proposal that would change human history. We cannot let this be forgotten, she said, her voice carrying the weight of 8 billion saved lives. 3 beings died for us. They asked for nothing. They expected nothing. Maria was a teacher from Brazil who had watched the crystal ship save her world. She had seen her students' faces when they realized they would live to grow up. That night, she had started writing. Her words spread across the internet, then across the world. The Kethmori Memorial Foundation was established within a week. Every nation on Earth contributed money and resources. The foundation had one simple mission: make sure humanity never forgot the crystal shepherds who saved their son. Dr. Chen became the foundation's first director of research. Her job was to study every piece of information about the Kethmori. Every telescope reading, every energy signature, every moment of their brief visit was carefully recorded and analyzed. We know so little about them, she told her team, but we'll learn. The Foundation built the largest library in human history. Every detail about the rescue was stored in multiple locations around the solar system. Books, digital files, crystal storage devices, and even stone carvings preserved the story. If human civilization ended tomorrow, future visitors would still know what the Kethmori had done. But the Foundation did more than just keep records. They created the Stellar Gratitude Protocol. Every human ship that left Earth carried a special beacon. The beacon constantly broadcast a message in Kethmori energy patterns. We remember. We are grateful. Yashtie. Schools around the world began teaching Kethmori studies. Children learned about stellar engineering, crystal technology, and energy-based life forms. They studied the aliens' sacrifice not just as history, but as an example of what intelligent beings could do for each other. 10 years after the rescue, humanity launched its first deep space exploration ship. The UES Gratitude was designed specifically to search for the Kethmori. It carried a crew of 200 volunteers who dedicated their lives to the search. The answer was always no. As years passed, humans spread throughout the galaxy. They colonized dozens of worlds and built space cities around distant stars. But every new colony followed the same tradition. The first building constructed was always a sanctuary garden. The gardens were beautiful places where crystal formations grew in patterns that looked like Keth-Mori ships. Volunteers tended these crystals with care, using techniques learned from studying the aliens' technology. The crystals hummed softly in the wind, creating music that sounded like distant stars singing. Children played in these gardens while their grandparents told stories of the dying light. Each generation learned about the three crystal beings who gave their lives for strangers. The stories never changed. The gratitude never faded. Dr. Chen grew old, searching for the Keth-Mori. When she retired at age 90, she had spent 70 years studying their technology. Her successor, Dr. James Park, continued the work with the same dedication. Every energy signature, every crystal fragment they left behind is a clue, Dr. Park told his students. We will find them. 100 years after the rescue, humanity made contact with their first alien species. The Ventar were peaceful traders who traveled between star systems selling rare metals. They were surprised when the first human question was not about trade or territory. Ambassador Thompson asked through the translation device. The Ventar looked confused. Crystal shepherds? Energy wanderers? We have heard legends, but they are myths. They're not myths, Thompson replied. They saved our world. The Ventar captain stared at the human for a long moment. They are real, Thompson said. News of the conversation spread throughout human space. If other species knew legends about the Keth-Mori, it meant the crystal beings were still out there somewhere. The search intensified. Humanity met 12 different alien species over the next century. Each first contact followed the same pattern. Before discussing trade, technology, or diplomacy, humans always asked about the Keth-Mori. Most species had never heard of them. A few knew old stories about wandering crystal ships that appeared during disasters. The stories were always the same. Crystal beings would arrive when a world was dying. They would give part of themselves to save the planet. Then they would leave, asking nothing in return. Most species treated these as fairy tales, but humans knew better. 200 years after the rescue, Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the exploration ship UES Remembrance. She was the great-great-granddaughter of the president who had announced the solar crisis. Following family tradition, she dedicated her life to finding the Keth-Mori. Log entry, day 2847 of our current mission, she recorded. We've searched 17 star systems in the outer rim. No sign of Keth-Mori energy signatures. Local species report no contact with crystal ships. Her crew never complained about the long mission. Every person aboard the Remembrance had volunteered for a lifetime of searching. They knew they might never find the Keth-Mori, but they also knew someone had to keep looking. In the cargo bay, they carried humanity's gift to the Crystal Shepherds. It was a crystal sculpture created by the greatest artists on Earth. Inside the crystal, light patterns told the story of the rescue. If they ever found the Keth-Mori, this sculpture would show them how deeply humans appreciated their sacrifice. The search ships sent regular reports back to Earth. Each message was the same. Still searching, still hoping. On Earth, the Memorial Foundation continued its work. They built bigger libraries and stronger beacons. They trained new generations of scientists to study Keth-Mori technology. They kept the sanctuary gardens beautiful and the stories alive. But as the years passed, some humans began to doubt. Maybe the Keth-Mori were dead. Maybe they had left the galaxy. Maybe they didn't want to be found. Maria Santos, now very old, spoke to these doubters at the Foundation's 200th anniversary celebration. Some of you wonder if our search is pointless, she said from her wheelchair. Her voice was weak, but her words were strong. You think maybe the Keth-Mori are gone forever? Maybe they are. She pointed to the crystal garden, visible through the window. We search because we are grateful. We remember Because we are human. 3 beings died for us. We didn't ask them to. We couldn't repay them. And if they are still out there, she continued, if they ever need help, they will know that somewhere in the galaxy, 8 billion humans and all their children remember what they did. They will know that kindness is never forgotten. The old woman smiled. That is why we search. When Maria Santos died at age 103, her funeral was attended by representatives from every human colony. Her last words were carved in crystal above her grave. Find them. Thank them. The search continued. Admiral Chen Wei-Lin stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, watching her fleet prepare for humanity's final battle. Through the view screen, she could see them coming. The Devourers, millions of black ships moving like a storm cloud across the stars. Status report, she ordered. All defensive fleets are in position, Commander Jackson replied. 3,000 ships ready to engage. Every colony world has been evacuated. Wei-Lin nodded, but she knew the truth. 3,000 ships against millions. It wasn't a battle. It was a delaying action while civilians escaped, and even that might not work. The Devourers had appeared 6 months ago at the edge of human space. At first, scouts thought they were just another alien species. But when the first contact team approached, the aliens attacked without warning. No communication, no demands, no negotiation, just pure, relentless hunger. The insects were not really insects. They were machines that looked like bugs. Each one was the size of a small car, with sharp metal claws and energy weapons built into their bodies. They moved in perfect coordination, like cells in a giant organism. But the worst part was what they did to planets. They didn't just attack. They consumed everything. Rock, metal, water, air, even the energy from stars. They ate entire worlds and used the materials to build more of themselves. The Altair colonies were the first to fall. 2 million humans lived on those worlds. The evacuation ships managed to save about half the population before the Devourers arrived. The rest, Wei-Lin tried not to think about the rest. Admiral, incoming transmission from Defense Command, the communications officer announced. President Harrison's face appeared on the screen. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the past month. The swarm will reach the Centauri system in approximately 4 hours, Wei-Lin reported. We'll engage them there. Wei-Lin hesitated. They'll reach Sol system in 3 days. Earth evacuation will be complete in 2 days. The president closed his eyes. 60%. I know, Admiral. Harrison straightened his shoulders. The evacuation ships will remember us. They'll carry humanity to new worlds. The transmission ended. Wei-Lin stared at the approaching swarm and thought about her daughter, safe aboard one of the evacuation ships. At least some humans would survive to remember Earth. Dr. Sarah Park sat in the Memorial Foundation's Archive Center, working frantically to save humanity's most important records. 230 years of research about the Keth Mori. Millions of documents, recordings, and crystal formations. All of it had to fit into the evacuation ship's limited storage space. Her assistant asked. Sarah looked around the vast library. How could she choose? Every piece of information might be the key to finding the Keth Mori someday. Take everything about their technology, she decided, and all the energy signature data. Her assistant nodded and continued copying files. Around them, other archivists worked to save what they could. The crystal gardens would have to be abandoned. The beautiful sculptures would be left behind. But the knowledge, the stories, the gratitude, that would survive. Ma'am, one of the younger archivists called out. What about the memorial crystals? Sarah paused her work. The memorial crystals contained recordings of every human voice that had ever said thank you to the Keth Mori. Billions of people across 2 centuries had added their gratitude to the crystal's memory. We take them, she said, All of them. That's not just data. 3 systems away, Captain Rodriguez watched her exploration ship join the evacuation fleet. The UES Remembrance carried 15,000 refugees from the outer colonies. They had been searching for the Keth Mori when the Devourers attacked. Now they were running for their lives. "Captain, incoming distress signal from the mining station at Kepler 442, her communications officer reported. Rodriguez checked the star charts. The mining station was only 50,000 kilometers from their current position. 200 miners worked there, extracting rare metals for ship construction. Rodriguez closed her eyes. They could save those 200 miners, but it would delay the evacuation convoy by several hours. If the Devourers were faster than expected, it could mean death for all 15,000 refugees aboard the convoy. She thought about the Keth Mori. 3 beings had died to save 8 billion strangers. They didn't calculate odds or worry about efficiency. They just helped. "Set course for the mining station," she ordered. "Captain, the risk." "I know the risk, Commander, but we're human." The rescue took 37 minutes. 200 miners were crammed into cargo holds designed for metal ore. It wasn't comfortable, but they were alive. As the Remembrance rejoined the evacuation fleet, Rodriguez received a message from Admiral Wei Lin. "First battle group has engaged the Devourers at Centauri. Enemy forces are larger than expected. Estimate complete fleet loss within 6 hours. Rodriguez passed the order to her fleet. 40 massive ships carrying 2 million human refugees accelerated toward the galactic rim. Behind them, human space was dying. On Earth, the last evacuation ships were loading. Families said goodbye to homes their ancestors had lived in for generations. Museums were emptied. Libraries were packed. The sanctuary gardens were carefully photographed so they could be rebuilt someday. But there wasn't room for everyone. The ships could only hold so many people. Volunteers stayed behind to keep Earth's systems running until the very end. They would send power to the defensive satellites and maintain communications with the fleet until the Devourers arrived. Dr. Park was among those staying. She stood in the Memorial Foundation's main hall, surrounded by empty shelves where the archives had been stored. Her assistant had asked before leaving. "Because someone needs to be here," Sarah replied. "When the end comes, someone human should be watching." She activated the Foundation's deep space beacon one last time. The message broadcast toward the stars in Keth Mori energy patterns: "We remember you. We were grateful." Admiral Wei Lin's fleet lasted longer than expected, 7 hours of continuous fighting before the Devourers broke through. The insects swarmed over the human ships like ants covering a piece of fruit. Each ship that died took hundreds of Devourers with it, but there were always more. Wei Lin watched her fleet die ship by ship. The UES Defender was one of the last vessels fighting. Half her crew was dead. Life support was failing. But she kept firing. "Admiral, all other ships have been destroyed," Commander Jackson reported. His voice was calm despite the blood running down his face. "Continue firing," Wei Lin ordered. The Devourers surrounded the Defender. Their energy weapons cut through the ship's armor like paper, but the human crew kept fighting. They fired until their weapons overheated. They rammed enemy ships with their own vessel. They died as humans had always died in war, trying to protect the innocent. Wei Lin's last act was to detonate the Defender's core. The explosion destroyed 1,000 Devourer ships and lit up space like a new star. But there were still millions more, moving toward Earth. On the observation deck of the evacuating ship UES Hope, 10-year-old Amy Martinez pressed her face against the window. She was too young to understand what was happening. She only knew that she was leaving Earth forever. She asked. Her grandmother, one of the last Memorial Foundation archivists, hugged the little girl tightly. "Someday, sweetheart." But as she said it, the old woman watched the dots of light that represented human worlds going dark one by one. The Devourers were consuming everything humans had built. The old woman had told Amy stories about the Keth Mori, just as her own grandmother had told her. "I don't know, sweetheart. Even then, because that's what humans do. We remember the good things." Behind them, in the distance too far to see, the devourer swarm approached Earth. In 3 days, they would consume the blue world that the Keth Mori had died to save. The sun would be next, its stable energy a feast for the hungry machines. But at the very edge of the solar system, where no human sensors could reach, something was happening. Space itself was beginning to glow with familiar crystalline light. Dr. Sarah Park stood alone in the Memorial Foundation's main hall when the impossible happened. Every crystal in the building began to sing. The sound was beautiful beyond words, harmonies that touched the soul and made her remember every good thing that had ever happened. The abandoned memorial crystals, the ones too large to evacuate, were glowing with warm light. "That's not possible," she whispered. The crystals had been silent for hours since the power grid failed, but now they blazed with energy that came from somewhere else. Outside, Earth's defense satellites detected massive objects appearing at the edge of the solar system. Not ships exactly, but something far more incredible. Entire worlds made of crystal, each one larger than Earth's moon. And they were moving fast. Captain Torres was commanding Earth's last orbital platform when the readings came in. "Energy signature analysis complete," the computer replied. "Patterns match archived Keth Mori frequencies." Torres stared at his screen. It couldn't be. The Keth Mori were just 3 small crystal beings when they saved Earth. This was something else entirely. This was a fleet of crystal worlds carrying energy signatures so powerful they made space itself glow. The lead world ship moved toward Earth, and as it came closer, its surface began to change. Crystal formations reshaped themselves into something that looked like a vast city. Towers of light rose from crystal mountains. Gardens of energy bloomed across the surface. And everywhere, beings of pure light moved through crystal passages. Then the voice came, not through radio or computers, but directly into the mind of every human in the solar system. Even the evacuees light years away heard it clearly. "Children of the small blue world," the voice said, warm with ancient kindness. Dr. Park fell to her knees as tears ran down her face. After 230 years of searching, the Keth Mori had found them. The voice continued, speaking to every human consciousness at once. "You remember us. In all our wanderings, in all the worlds we have visited, none have remembered as you remember." On the evacuation ship UES Hope, little Amy Martinez tugged on her grandmother's sleeve. "Grandma! Grandma!" All around the ship, refugees were crying and laughing and hugging each other. The impossible had happened. Their prayers had been answered. But Amy's grandmother, wise with age and study, noticed something important. Through the viewports, she could see other crystal worlds appearing. Ships that weren't Keth Mori. Different patterns, different colors, but all made of light and energy. She wondered aloud. As if hearing her question, the Keth Mori voice spoke again. "We did not return alone. The story of your gratitude spread throughout the galaxy. Many heard how you remembered our small gift. They were moved by your faithfulness." The crystal worlds spread throughout the solar system, taking defensive positions around Earth. There were dozens of them. Each one represented a different species that had been touched by humanity's long search and endless gratitude. "We are the confluence of light," the voice explained, "united by the belief that kindness must be protected." Captain Torres watched in amazement as beings of pure energy began emerging from the crystal worlds. Not just Keth Mori, but dozens of different energy-based life forms. Some looked like flowing light. Others resembled geometric patterns made of stars. All of them moved with purpose toward the approaching Devourer swarm. The Devourers had reached Neptune's orbit. Their dark ships blocked out stars like a moving shadow. Millions of insect machines hungry to consume another solar system. They had already eaten the Altair colonies and human defensive fleets. Earth should have been easy prey. But the Devourers had never faced the confluence of light. The battle began without warning. The first wave of Devourer scouts met something they had never encountered before. Weapons that turned matter into pure light. Shields that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Ships that could phase in and out of normal space. Captain Torres watched through his sensors as 1,000 Devourer vessels simply vanished. Not destroyed, but converted. Their dark metal became crystal. Their hunger became harmony. In seconds, the enemy scouts had become part of the Confluence fleet. Torres asked his computer, "Unknown. Energy patterns suggest reality manipulation at the quantum level." The Devourer swarm responded as it always did. Attack in overwhelming numbers. Millions of ships rushed toward the crystal worlds, firing weapons that could crack planets. But when their energy beams hit the crystal shields, something beautiful happened. The weapon's power was absorbed and transformed into pure light that made the crystal cities even brighter. The Devourers weren't just failing to damage their enemies, they were making them stronger. Dr. Park watched from Earth as the battle unfolded above her world. Crystal beings the size of skyscrapers moved through space like dancers, their movements creating patterns of light that confused and trapped Devourer ships. Where they touched the enemy vessels, darkness became brightness. One of the Kethmori, massive beyond anything she remembered, approached Earth directly. Its voice spoke to her personally. "Dr. Park of the Memorial Foundation, we know you. Your beacons called to us across the void." "You came back," Sarah whispered. "We never left," the Kethmori replied. "We have been searching for you as you searched for us. We learned of your gratitude from the stars themselves." High above Earth, the battle was turning into something beyond warfare. It was becoming transformation. Every Devourer ship that came close to the crystal worlds was changed. Their hunger became curiosity. Their need to consume became a desire to create. The Confluence had weapons, but they didn't use them to destroy. They used them to heal, to transform, to show the Devourers what they could become if they chose cooperation over consumption. Some of the insect machines resisted. They tried to flee or fight harder, but others began to change. Their dark metal grew crystal formations. Their energy weapons became tools for building instead of destroying. For the first time in their existence, they experienced something other than hunger. Captain Rodriguez, commanding the evacuation fleet, watched the battle from the edge of the galaxy. Her sensors showed impossible readings. The Devourer swarm wasn't being defeated. It was being recruited. "Captain, incoming transmission from the crystal ships," her communications officer reported. A new voice spoke, one she didn't recognize. It sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Human vessel UES Remembrance. We are the Silvareth of the Confluence. We have heard your ship's name in the songs of stars. You search for those who help others." Rodriguez could hardly believe it. "We are here because you never stopped looking, because you never stopped being grateful." The battle lasted 3 days, but it wasn't really a battle. It was a conversion. The confluence of light surrounded the Devourer swarm with patience and power. They offered transformation instead of destruction. They showed the hungry machines that there was more to existence than consumption. By the end, half the Devourer fleet had been transformed into crystal ships. The other half had fled toward the galactic rim, confused and afraid of beings who fought with love instead of hate. Earth was safe. The human colonies were safe. The evacuation was no longer necessary. But more importantly, humanity had learned something incredible about the universe. They weren't alone. They weren't unique in their capacity for gratitude. There were others out there who believed that kindness deserved protection. Dr. Park stood in her ruined archive, surrounded by singing crystals, and heard the Kethmori voice one final time. "Children of Earth, will you join us? Will you help us find others who remember good deeds?" She thought about 230 years of searching, about memorial gardens and grateful children, about humans who had spent their entire lives looking for 3 crystal beings who had died to save strangers. "Yes," she said simply. Above her, the crystal worlds began to reshape themselves. The confluence was growing. Humanity had been found worthy not just of rescue, but of membership in something greater. The age of human wandering was about to begin. 1 year after the battle, Ambassador Maria Hernandez stood in the most beautiful place she had ever seen. The Hall of Remembrance floated in space near Earth's moon, built by human and Kethmori engineers working together. Crystal walls held memories from 1,000 worlds. Light patterns told stories of species helping species across the galaxy. Today was special. Today, humanity would sign the Covenant of Remembrance and become the newest members of the Confluence of Light. Asked Elder Shentai, the Kethmori, who had become Maria's closest friend among the crystal beings. The Elder's form shifted like living light as they communicated through patterns of energy and gentle thoughts. "A little," Maria admitted. "This is the most important moment in human history. We're not just joining an alliance." "That is exactly why you belong with us," Shentai replied. "Most species think only of themselves." Through the crystal walls, Maria could see the representatives arriving. Ships from 47 different species, all members of the confluence. Energy beings like the Kethmori. Living clouds of intelligent gas. Species made of pure thought. Creatures so strange that humans had no words to describe them. But they all had one thing in common. They had all chosen kindness over selfishness. They had all decided that helping others was more important than helping themselves. President Chen walked up to Maria, carrying a crystal tablet that held humanity's promises. The tablet had been grown, not made, using techniques taught by the Kethmori. It would last forever, keeping humanity's words safe for all time. President Chen asked with a smile. Maria nodded. The ceremony began with the Song of Memories. Every species in the confluence shared their most important moment of kindness. The Veltari told of saving a dying star. The Osendri spoke of protecting a primitive species from a meteor impact. Each story was different, but all had the same message. When someone needs help, you help them. When it was humanity's turn, Maria stood before the assembly. She looked at beings made of light and energy and tried to find words that would explain what this moment meant to her species. 231 years ago, our sun was dying, she began. We had given up hope. We were ready to accept death. Then 3 Kethmori appeared and saved our world. They didn't know us. They owed us nothing. The hall grew quiet as every being listened to the familiar story. What happened next makes us human. We didn't forget. We didn't move on. We didn't say thank you and continue with our lives. We spent 2 centuries searching for the Kethmori. Maria held up the crystal tablet. Today we promise that no act of kindness will ever be forgotten while humans exist. We will search the galaxy for species in need. We will help without asking for payment. She paused and looked directly at Elder Shentai. The Kethmori elder's form brightened. Around the hall, other beings glowed with approval. In the confluence, promises were sacred things. The signing ceremony was beautiful. Each species placed their signature on the crystal tablet in their own unique way. The humans signed with bio-patterns. The Kethmori added their energy signature. Other species contributed quantum imprints, thought patterns, and forms of marking that humans didn't understand but could appreciate. When the tablet was complete, it contained the most important promise in galactic history, that the confluence would protect all species that chose kindness over cruelty. 6 months later, Captain Amy Martinez stood on the bridge of humanity's first confluence ship. The UES Gratitude was built using crystal technology and human engineering. It was designed for one purpose: finding species that needed help. Amy was the same little girl who had asked about the crystal angels during the evacuation. Now, 20 years later, she commanded her own ship and crew. Her mission was to explore unknown regions of space, looking for civilizations in trouble. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from the Vega system," her science officer reported. Amy smiled. This was what she had trained for her entire life. "Set course for Vega." The ship's crystal core hummed with power as they jumped to faster-than-light speed. In the engine room, human engineers worked alongside Kethmori technicians, maintaining systems that combined the best of both species' knowledge. When they arrived at Vega, they found a planet in crisis. The local species was facing extinction from a global plague. Their medical technology was too primitive to find a cure. They were dying slowly and didn't even know help was possible. Amy followed the confluence protocols. First, study the problem. Second, find a solution that didn't interfere with the species' natural development. Third, help without revealing who you are. The cure for the plague was simple once you understood it. The Gratitude's medical team created a treatment that the local species could manufacture with their existing technology. Then they transmitted the formula directly to the planet's leading scientists, making it look like a natural discovery. Within 6 months, the plague was eliminated. An entire species was saved, and they never knew aliens had helped them. "Mission successful," Amy reported to Confluence Command. "Species designation Vega 3 has survived their extinction event. Cure distributed successfully." "Well done, Captain Martinez," came the reply. Amy leaned back in her command chair and thought about her grandmother, who had died the year before at age 93. The old woman had lived to see humanity join the confluence. Back on Earth, the Memorial Foundation had become something new and wonderful. Instead of just preserving the memory of the Kethmori rescue, it now collected stories of kindness from across the galaxy. Children learned about the Veltari who saved dying stars, the Oshendri who protected primitive worlds, and hundreds of other species who chose helping over hurting. Dr. Sarah Park, now elderly but still sharp, directed the Foundation's new mission. They had become the Galactic Library of Good Deeds. Every act of kindness by any confluence species was recorded and remembered. A young student asked during one of Sarah's lectures. Sarah smiled and pointed to a crystal formation that told the story of a species called the Morden. They had sacrificed their homeworld's atmosphere to create a protective barrier around a neighboring planet that was threatened by solar flares. "Because," Sarah said, "when you remember the good things others have done, you want to do good things yourself. Kindness spreads like light in the darkness." The student nodded thoughtfully. "We remember because it makes everyone better," Sarah replied. 10 years after joining the confluence, humanity had helped save 17 different species. They had prevented 3 wars, cured 2 plagues, and protected 5 primitive civilizations from natural disasters. Each mission followed the same pattern: help without asking for thanks, then move on to the next crisis. But the most important thing humanity brought to the confluence was their gift for remembering. Other species were good at helping, but they often forgot the details afterward. Humans never forgot anything. The Archive of Light, humanity's contribution to the confluence, became the most visited place in their territory. Billions of beings came to see their own species' acts of kindness recorded and celebrated. Parents brought their children to learn about the importance of helping others. On the anniversary of humanity's first year in the confluence, Elder Shentai visited Earth. The Kethmori had changed over the centuries, becoming larger and more powerful. but they had never forgotten their first contact with humans. "You have exceeded our hopes," Shentai told the gathered humans. "When we saved your son, we gave you life, but you have given us something more precious." Ambassador Hernandez, now elderly herself, stood with the elder in the original memorial garden where the first crystal formations had been planted centuries ago. She asked, "Before we met you, we wandered without direction. We helped when we found those in need, but we had no greater mission. You taught us that kindness remembered becomes kindness multiplied." Shentai's form brightened as children played among the crystal trees. "Because of you, the confluence exists. Because of the confluence, hundreds of species have been saved." Maria smiled as she watched her own granddaughter playing with a crystal flower that sang when touched. "My grandmother used to say that kindness never dies." "Your grandmother was wise," Shentai agreed. As night fell on Earth, the crystal formations began their evening song. It was a melody that told the story of the galaxy itself, of species helping species, of strangers becoming friends, of the endless cycle of kindness that connected all living things. In the distance, ships were preparing to leave for new missions. Human crews working with alien partners, all united by the same goal: find those who need help and help them. The search would never end. There would always be someone in need, but now there would also always be someone willing to help. Because in a universe where most species forgot their debts, humanity had taught others that the greatest gift wasn't the help you received, but the help you remembered to give. And in quiet memorial gardens throughout human space, crystals continued to sing their eternal song. Those who aid the earth are never forgotten. They returned to return the favor,